Welcome to Wednesday Wisdom.
Good morning. This is Jos Visser, the author of Wednesday Wisdom, and this week's article is called More Things I Learned Running a Small Business. This is actually part 2 of a two-parter, so if you missed the part 1, please go back to josvisser.substack.com and read or listen to it there. Those of you who read or listened to part 1 of this article series might remember that I started my life as an independent consultant teaching Unix fundamentals courses through some agency that went bankrupt before they had paid any of my invoices. This happened on a Tuesday, which was a bit of a bummer because Tuesdays were typically great for me and bad for the students because on day 2 of the Unix fundamentals course we covered VI. On Wednesday morning, I drove to the HP training center and ran into a colleague of sorts, another independent consultant who had also happened to be teaching a Unix fundamentals course that week. He spoke the magic words, "We need to talk." He had gotten the same call I did, and we both realized the exact same thing. With the bankruptcy of the agency, we were now also free of the anti-competition clause of our contract with them, which opened up the opportunity for doing business with HP directly. During the lunch break, we walked up, discussed the situation with HP Education's management, and cut a deal to deliver courses for them without an intermediary. This turned out to be hugely profitable because we negotiated a higher hourly rate while at the same time giving a discount to HP, essentially dividing the agency's fee between us. I had lost about 20,000 guilders in the bankruptcy, but because of the increased hourly rate, I earned that back within a few months, after which I started making a profit, compared to what I would have earned if I were still working through the agency. Lesson learned: never let a good bankruptcy go to waste. Fun fact: in the week thereafter, the agency people called us and said they were planning to continue under a new name and with new financiers. They offered that if we would continue to work through them, we could maybe get some of our old invoices paid. But since the other consultant and I had a good grip on basic arithmetic, we respectfully declined. I really liked my partner in his particular crime, and it turned out that he was actually in a small firm with yet another consultant, and together they rented a real office. I was hugely impressed. This was before WeWorks and other co-working spaces existed, and having a real office seemed like an important step towards being a legit company. I craved that legitimacy because, at that time, being an independent contractor working from my home office didn't feel very impressive, and I had a hard time explaining to my friends and family what I was up to. Lesson learned: get into therapy sooner. There is really nothing wrong with being an independent consultant with an extremely low cost base. Wanting to be taken seriously as a real company was nothing more than a projection of my own low self-esteem. The three of us decided to join forces so that we could share the costs of the trappings of a real company: the office, a phone line, letterhead, etc. But we did so in the dumbest possible way, because we also wanted to stay as independent as possible and take home whatever we earned through our individual work. If my business partners wanted to work fewer hours or at a lower hourly rate or maybe get a bigger car, that was all fine and dandy, but I didn't want that to influence my income. We decided to use the same model that the European Union employs, which basically consists of financially independent states that share the costs of a central bureaucracy and a few shared programs. We did something similar. We would shop ourselves out to the customers as we saw fit and have our company invoice the customer. In turn, we would invoice the company for my personal holdings for a slightly lower amount, leaving just enough money in the company to pay for the office, the phone line, and a Chinese takeaway on Tuesday evenings. The problem with this model is that it's a brake on business development, but I'm running ahead of myself a bit. Eventually, we had so much work that we felt that we needed and could afford employees. This was a quantum leap, because when you have employees, you're in a whole nother world with respect to taxes, social insurance payments, and risk. European labor laws are famously strict when it comes to laying off people, and at the time you basically needed a court's permission to let someone go. Things have become a bit more flexible since then, but it's still a very far cry from the at-will employment schemes that are the norm in the US. If you hire your first employee, the overhead in administration is considerable. So we figured that in order to mitigate that a bit, we probably needed more employees. For one reason or another, we thought that there was some magical number of employees where it would just run itself. Initially, we thought this would happen at about 5 employees. Then when we had 5 employees and it was still a drag, we thought that maybe the magic number was 10 employees. Lesson learned. There is no magic number of employees where it becomes easy. Employees are amazing, especially when you hire well, but they always add risk and work. There are no two ways about this. With employees came the need to do more sales, but here was a problem. None of the 3 founders wanted to do any sales, nor were they very good at it. So we did what we thought was the next best thing. We placed ads in a well-known Dutch IT weekly called The Computable, which at the time was a weekly newspaper on actual paper. These ad campaigns were not very successful. If memory serves me right, we literally only found 1 new customer through all of our ads. Lesson learned. If you're a very small firm with very good people, the only reason people do business with you is because they know you. Nobody's going to pay upwards of $1,000 a day for someone they found through a website or an ad. Personal knowledge and maybe referrals are the way to go. Our customers regularly said things like, "We want to hire 2 more of person. Can't you clone them?" I vividly remember sitting in a meeting with the VP of a customer together with a young gentleman we had hired and who we were looking to offer to that customer as my replacement. The VP literally said, "Look, we would love to have more of Jas's time, but he is too busy. And he says you, the young gentleman, are very good, and if Jas says that, that's good enough for us." A problem with body shopping is that there's no leverage. At the start of the year, you can calculate your maximum company income for that year by multiplying the number of people by the hourly rate and by 1,600 hours. How are we going to do better than that? The answer: write software and sell it. You know what real companies do? They are software companies. And we knew how to write software probably better than most other people. So this is the way. Through our personal connections, we had figured out that lawyers were still in the Middle Ages when it came to technology, and we thought that we could develop an application to automate the core processes inside a lawyer's office. A halfway decent idea, if I may say so, one with potential. Unfortunately, again, we went about it in the dumbest possible way. Developing and selling software is an incredibly difficult gig. An expensive gig, too, and to top it off, we did not actually have any clue on how to do it. For one reason or another, we apparently thought that the fact that we could code like demons and understood computers like few people we knew was enough. In the words of my flight instructor, to be young again. We didn't have a plan, we didn't have a budget, but what we did have was optimism. So we started. One of our employees was a gifted Delphi developer, and we put them to work. Pretty soon we realized that because this developer was, well, developing, he was not bringing in any money, though we did have to pay their salary. That was not immediately a problem, but the company was on somewhat thin financial eyes because of our young age. We had some reasonable buffers, more than enough to address a few months of payroll, but probably not enough to fund a major software development initiative. To make matters worse, this project required directional support from the founders, but because of our financing model, none of the founders wanted to work on this project because a founder's income was still directly related to their own billable hours. This was clearly going nowhere, but we'd spent all this money already and were not willing to pull the plug. This was clearly going nowhere, but we had spent all this money already and we were not willing to pull the plug. Lesson learned. The sunk cost fallacy is the irrational tendency to continue a behavior or project because of past investments of time, money, or effort, even when continuing is not the best option. But eventually, reality caught up with us, and after spending too much time and way too much money, we finally called it quits. Lesson learned. Developing and selling software is incredibly difficult and incredibly expensive. I wrote about that in another article, which is aptly called No, You Don't Want an App, and I really can recommend reading that one. Of course, we also changed our internal financing structure so that in the future it will be possible for the founders to work on internal projects that were not immediately generating revenue. Better late than never. One of the other things that happened in the 90s is Windows NT. Even though we started as a Unix shop and we had veered into things like high availability, storage, and backup, we did appreciate the enormous market that Windows NT offered. I volunteered to get into Windows, and before I knew it, I was teaching courses on Windows NT system management, Microsoft System Management Server, and other related topics. There was a lot of business to be done, and we made good money. But here was the problem. We didn't really like Windows very much, and even though the money was good, we were having less and less fun. Eventually, we cut the cord and made the decision to stop doing Windows NT-related training and consultancy. Eventually, I even stopped using Windows on my laptop, somewhat famously documented in a series of articles called Living Without Windows. Lesson learned. Money is one thing, but you have to at least like what you're doing. I'm kind of old-fashioned, so I'm not advocating to purely follow your passion, but you have to find a balance between things you like and things that make money. All things considered, here is maybe the most important lesson I have learned. It is okay to make reasonable mistakes. We definitely made some whoppers, but at the end of the day, we were always careful enough not to bet the house, and consequently, we were able to survive through a number of economic downturns. The reason for that is really simple. At the end of the day, we always delivered a good service at a reasonable price. That simple fact made customers loyal, and it allowed the little company that was founded after my first customer went bankrupt into one that existed now for over 30 years, and it has been profitable for every single year of its existence. Eat that, Intel. It is something I am very proud to have contributed to.